Hello, welcome to our webinar this evening on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Art Study Opportunity for Youth Grants for our fiscal year 2023, which for us runs from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. I am Carolyn Koska. I'm the Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And first, we'll just run through what we're going to talk about tonight. We'll talk briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll go look at the guidelines for this grant program. Then we'll go over to our website and take a look at the resources that are available for you there. Then we will go into our grant system and walk through the application, and we'll finish up talking about the grant process or what happens after you submit an application. We'll stop a couple times for questions. So if you want to otherwise keep yourselves muted, you can type things in the chat if you want as we're going. And then at the end, we'll have some more time if you want to talk about a specific project that you have in mind. So Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. So here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. Our funding comes mostly from the state of Minnesota. We have some funding from their general fund, and the most of it comes from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive some funding for the McKnight Foundation that we use for our grants for artists, and from memberships and donations from around our region. So our Art Study Opportunity for Youth Grants, they are open to students who are entering grades 5 through 12 in fall of 2023. So to make the edges of that clear, if a student was in 4th grade right now, they would be entering 5th grade in the fall of 2023, so they could apply. If someone is a high school senior right now, they will be finished with school by fall of 2023, so they would not be eligible to apply. We also need you to live in our region for at least 6 months before you apply, and then you would need to remain living in our region during the span of your project. And to make clear what our region actually is, we cover 18 counties, which include Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine. And that region also includes 2 tribal nations, the Upper Sioux community and the Lower Sioux community. And we acknowledge that this whole geographic area occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. Also, in order to apply, students should have some experience already in the art form that they're wanting to study. And this is open to all arts disciplines and may include things like the visual arts, which would be things like painting, ceramics, photography, writing, media arts, dance, music, or theater. The funds for this grant can be used for a special opportunity that the student is taking, sort of, for the most part, outside of any experience in this art form they would get in school or in regular lessons. So it would be things like studying with a professional artist in your area. Maybe they want to attend an arts workshop or a camp of some kind, or a series of classes. But for students who qualify for the federal free or reduced lunch program, they can also apply for just standard weekly lessons that they're taking, such as piano lessons. Otherwise, we'd really like it to be an opportunity out of the ordinary for the student. And these grants are available for up to $500. A few things that are not eligible for these grants: if you have a project that doesn't really have an art focus, activities that take place outside of Minnesota. We are using state funds for this grant, so it's a requirement that your study activities take place here in Minnesota. Also not eligible would be participation in a school or organization band or choir trip, equipment or supplies that are for something else that's not really related to the focus of your project, credits or materials necessary to fulfill degree requirements. Also not eligible, religious socialization of the participants or audience, attempts to influence any state or federal legislation, payment of debts incurred before the grant begins, and applicants with a past grant project still in progress or an overdue final report. This is an overview of the eligibility things to be aware of for this grant program, but it's a good idea to take a look at the complete guidelines for the program, and after a bit we will take a look at where you can find those. So we have one grant round per year for this program, and the application deadline for that is March 29th. And we also have with that an earliest project start date, which is the earliest day that you can start anything having to do with your project. And I'll just point out too, on that March 29th deadline, applications need to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. The system will not accept submissions after that time. So you'll need to choose a start date for your project, and you'll first want to check for that earliest allowed start date, which we just saw was May 1st. And that's important to keep in mind because you can't start any project activities before that date or spend any funds before your start date. And that would include things like ordering supplies, registering for a class or a camp, any other fees that you're paying, any auditions or rehearsals. And then this would be pretty rare for the kinds of projects the students will be doing, but you also could not do any advertising before your start date. So you would want to think about keeping that earliest start date in mind, and then what date does it make sense for you to start things toward your project. So this would not be the first day of your camp that you're attending. You'd have to think backwards to when do you need to register for that camp. So that is choosing your start date. And end dates are much easier. You just need to give yourself some time to fully complete whatever the project was that you wanted to do, and to think about how things turned out to evaluate the project. The only limitation on that is that all projects that are awarded this year need to be finished up by June 30th of 2024. So that will be a bit over a year that you'll have to do your project if you want. Any questions so far? All right, I haven't seen any questions come in or heard anything, so we will continue on and we'll head over to our website. So here is our website, and as we're getting started here, I'll just point out that if you scroll down below these slides here, there's a black grants box that has a login button, and that is the quickest way to get into our grant system to either start an application or look at information in there. So remember that spot, but we're going to first head over to this workshops and assistance page. This is just an overview of all of the ways that you can get some help while you are working on your application. We have grant support open office hours, that are normally the second Tuesday of each month in our office in Marshall from 10 to 2. You can stop in and sit and work on your application, and we'll be right there to answer questions or talk through anything, get some help with getting your work samples together. I will note that this month we are actually doing the second Monday of the month because we are all out of the office at a conference on the Tuesday. We also have some Q&A sessions about our grants, and these are just a time for people to ask any questions about any of our grants that we have, very informal. We have one of those coming up on Thursday, March 9th at 7 p.m. There's also a link to schedule some time with me if you'd like to talk through anything grant related. And then here is a list of all of the grant workshops we've had for this year, along with links to the video recordings of those. So if you check back here, you'll find the recording of tonight's webinar after a few days here. But we will head over to our page for our student grant here. Here is another place where you can get to our grant system, this Apply Now button. You don't have to be applying to follow that. It just takes you to the login. The things that are available here for you include those grant guidelines that we talked about earlier. Important to read through those. We have the application questions in a Word document. Some people like to work in that first and then paste their answers into the online application later. We have a sample budget form here. You can take a look at what criteria our panel will be using to score your applications. And you can even take a look at what the questions on your final report will be, just to get an idea of what that might be like. We also have some important dates listed here. It has our date for the workshop that we're doing right now. But if you come back here in a few days, that'll have the link again to the recording of this evening. And some other dates here are, you can request a staff review of your draft by March 15th. It's got that March 29th application deadline on there again. And then our panel review when the board will be making their decisions. And finally, that earliest project start date that you can have. Here are, below that are just some alternative ways to apply. There's a video tutorial for the online grant system, but we're just going to head right in there ourselves and click that Apply Now button. So if you have worked in the system before, you could just go ahead and log in. If you are brand new to the system, you can create an account here. And if you're not sure whether you have an account in the system or not, you can just contact us and we can get that figured out for you. But I will just log in here. And when you log in here, you'll come to your applicant dashboard, unless you are coming into the system for the first time, and then you'll go directly to this apply page. And this lists all of the grants that we have currently available. You'll need to just scroll through and find, here's our art study opportunity for youth. If you want, there's a preview button. You can take a look at the form without actually starting anything. Otherwise, if you're ready to go, you can hit apply, which is what we're going to do. All right, here's our application. I'll just point out a couple features here to you. Up here, we have Google Translate embedded in the site. If you'd like to be working in a different language, this will translate the interface and the questions for you, and you can work in that language. If you have done an application in the system before, this copy previous answers button can be helpful. It'll let you choose from your previous applications, and it will copy answers over to any questions that are the same between those two applications. There's also this collaborate button. This is really helpful to invite somebody to work on the application with you. So if you are going to be studying with an artist, for instance, you could invite them here and they could come in and add their information into the application for you. So you would just put in their email address, decide what level of permission you want to give them, type a little message asking whatever it is you want them to do, and invite. They will be able to, they'll get an email that will direct them to the system, and they'll only just need to create a password in order to get in here to work on your application with you. Right at the top, we just have a couple of ways to find some help quickly. Here lets you schedule some time on my calendar, either by phone or Zoom or in person, or you can email questions to me. And you'll start out entering a project name. As you see by these examples, it can be pretty basic, but just describing what it is that you're wanting to do. And then you'll enter in how much you are requesting. Then again, we've got here links to some of those documents from earlier, the guidelines, the scoring criteria, some tips as you are working on your application. I'll point out about the character limits. You'll see that most of the fields have a lot of characters allowed, and we're not expecting you to fill that all up. We just want to make sure that you have enough space in case there's something that you need to say a lot about, but don't feel like you need to try and pad out your answer to fill up the whole text box. If you like, you can share pronouns. Then we ask you to enter what grade you will be going into in the fall. And then you will describe what it is you want to do for your study opportunity. Who are you working with? Where will it be? When is it? And just any details that you know about how this is all going to work. Then you can enter some information about that opportunity, and depending on the kind of activity that you're going to be doing, there are some different things that you might need to attach here. So if you are just going to be studying one-on-one with an artist, we ask in this text box, briefly describe their qualifications and upload their resume. There are a couple buttons here, and also include a link to their artist's website. So we've got a couple places where you can put website information. If you are doing a workshop or class that just has one instructor, you'll provide information about them and about the classes, and you can link to their website again below. Whatever information you'd like to provide there. And then if you're going to a series of classes or a camp that have a whole bunch of instructors, you can just more broadly describe the whole opportunity and connect to their website or some online brochure. So here's, again, a space to describe things here as far as the opportunity that you are wanting to do. You can upload some things. You can talk about, these are the links that I am providing below here. One other thing that you need if you are doing a one-on-one study with an artist, you'll need them to provide some samples of their work. And there are things they can upload or link to their website. Again, this would be a great place to have them to use that collaborate button and have them come in here and add that information themselves. And then we also ask, if you're doing, again, that kind of one-on-one study, to have a note from the artist that they're agreeing to the project, to upload that here. And then you'll put in those dates that we talked about, your start date and end date. All right, then we have the budget. You can either use this Excel form that we have here, which I'll start opening, or create your own budget if that works better for you, but I'll show you what this one is like. You can put either your name or a title of your project up here, and then you've just got space to list any costs that you have related to the project. If you're doing something like a camp, you may only use one line and just put the total amount there, but you would enter in whatever those costs are here. We'll stick in here, let's say we're going to a camp that costs $400. And you'll see it totals for us down here. Then it helps you to figure out how much you can request. It tells us your request cannot exceed $400, which it grabbed from here, or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. So here's our art study opportunity for youth, $500. 400 is less than 500, so we can request $400. So then you could go back and fill in that field at the very beginning of the application with your actual number. But let's say my camp is a little more expensive. Let's say it's $600. Now we can't exceed 600 or the maximum amount, whichever is less. So now our 500 is less. That would be how much we can request. And then it asks you to show where the rest of the money is coming from for this. So maybe you've been saving up to attend this camp, and so you're using some of your savings here. So you would fill this out, save it, and then upload it into the application here. And then there's a text field here if there's anything from the budget that you need to explain a little bit more, if you want to talk about how you came up with some of those numbers, if you're including some mileage in there or something, or how many times you're meeting with the artist for so much money per time, things like that. All right, then we start talking about you and your art. So it asks about your past experience. What kinds of activities have you done in this art form before? What experience do you have? How long have you been working in that? And then just what have been some of the more challenging things you have done with your art and what made you want to do those. So just talking about what has been your experience in this art form so far. Then there's some space for you to provide samples of your work, and depending on your art form, that might be written work, images, audio, video. And so we've got a couple different ways for you to attach things to the application here. You can upload things and then describe them in the box above. We've got several of those fields, or you can provide links if you are linking to a video, for instance, and again, describe what it is that you are linking to. Then we ask you to think about how this activity will be helping you as an artist. So at first it asks you to think about your stronger and weaker areas as an artist and how this particular experience will look at those strengths and weaknesses and help you to grow. Or what are you expecting to learn from this particular instructor that you are not learning in your current situation? And then we want you to think a little more specifically, what changes are you hoping will happen for yourself as an artist? And you could think about if those were changes to your skills, to your knowledge, your attitude, your behavior. And we also remind people to focus on changes for yourself, not on changes for maybe the other participants in the camp that you're going to or audience members. Just really think about what this will do for you to be able to have this experience. Then we want you to think about how you might know if those changes have actually taken place. Is there a way to measure or prove that that has happened? And we have an example here of some possible changes and measurements for your project for a couple different art disciplines. If you're doing visual art, this person was wanting to improve their watercolor skills. They wanted to complete at least 3 paintings and show them at a local student art exhibit and learn how to put together a portfolio for applying to future things. And their method of measuring was they wanted to have their mentor critique those pieces to see if the skills have improved. They will get feedback from people who were at the student art exhibit, and they will have a plan in place for putting together a portfolio. Here's a music example. They wanted to develop stronger ensemble playing skills, to have better tone, stronger vibrato and harmonics, better phrasing, and growth in their ability to interact with their ensemble. So they were going to record some of their individual practice before the camp, and then come back and compare some recordings and also get feedback from their instructors. So that you can look at this to hopefully give you an idea of what those measurements and changes might look like. Then we ask you to think about this experience that you're wanting to have. It says you may be spending several more hours per week practicing your art form. If you're able to do this, why are you willing to commit this amount of time to this experience? Why are you willing to do the extra work that this might require for you? Then we're just collecting some data and numbers here, some characteristics about you that you can fill out, and then some audience numbers. How many artists are you going to be working with during this process? If you're going to be performing or showing your work in any way, how many adults do you think will see your work? And then for the children or youth benefiting, you can either just enter one for yourself, or if you are going to be showing your work in some way, you would add on to that the number of children that might be in the audience. But at minimum, you're probably going to have 1 artist and 1 child involved in your project. Then we just have some electronic signatures here at the bottom. Student can type in their name here, and then we ask for a parent signature as well if the student is under 18. So when you get to this point, there are these save and submit buttons here down at the bottom. The form will be auto-saving as you're working, but you can also come here and click this Save Application button or Submit when you're ready, but we'll click Save, and then you'll see it gives you a list of what you still need to answer of the required questions. So this can help you kind of keep track of your progress. If you wanted to keep working, you would click Continue here, and that'll take you back to your application, but we're going to head back to the dashboard. And you'll see now here is the application that you just started. And to get back into that, you would just click this Edit Application link. And this would be the same place you'll come back to if you're awarded a grant to do your contract and your report. We'll break for a few questions again. Not hearing anything, we will continue on. Some tips for working on your application. It's always a good idea to start as early as you can, especially when you're relying on someone else for some of the information. For instance, if you're getting information from the artist that you're going to be working with, just to give yourself enough time for that, enough time to figure out some of your work samples if you need help with some of those, or to just get any questions answered. It's also really good to read the guidelines and criteria carefully. We just want to make sure that people don't do the whole application, all that the work, and then discover that they weren't eligible for some reason. So very important to just check through the guidelines. And then you saw in the application that a lot of the questions have multiple parts to them. So make sure that you're catching all of those and touching on all of those in your answer. You can just keep your answers nice and clear. They don't have to be super long like we talked about before, and you could just use everyday language. We don't need any fancy grant language for this, just as if you were telling somebody about your project. It's also good to assume that the people who will be reading your application don't know anything about you or about your the experience that you're wanting to do. Maybe it's really common that people from your school go to a particular camp during the summer, but it could well be that the people reviewing it may not have heard of that. So just make sure to provide enough information there. And then, as always, don't hesitate to contact us. We are here to help you. And here are, again, some ways that we can help you. You can always talk through your project before you're getting started, just to make sure it makes sense to apply for this. You can get answers to your questions as you're working on the application. And then you also can let us know if you have a draft of your application ready, and we can take a look at it before you submit to just make sure that you have everything that you need. That was what the date to request an application review was for. We can guarantee that we'll be able to look at your draft if you ask us about it by that date. But if it's after that, you could still ask, but we may or may not be able to take a look. So once you submit your application, we will review that for eligibility and completeness. And if at that stage we find that there's something missing or something that's not clear with eligibility, we will contact you, and you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever that is. And then all of your applications will head over to a group of individuals, our panel, who will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for the program. So you'll see that staff doesn't have any say in what gets funded or not. We're really there to just help you through the process. So then the panel's recommendations will go on to our board of directors, and they will make final funding decisions based on those recommendations. So the criteria that the panel will be using to score your application, there are two things they'll be looking for. They will look at the excellence of your work, which is worth half of your score. And they'll look for things like what kinds of past activities and experience do you have in this art form, and have they been significant for your age? Were they good quality experiences? They'll look to see if you have been challenging yourself artistically already, and they'll take a look at the work samples that you submitted. And then the other half of your score will be related to the project's contribution to the student's growth. So they will look at the actual opportunity that you were planning to do, either the artist or other instructor or camp that you're going to is that have high artistic merit. Does the experience have the potential to strengthen your skills? Are you showing a good level of commitment to this opportunity? And have you thought about how this could help you to grow in your art form? So that's what they will be looking at as they are talking about and scoring your application. And then once the panel has finished their scores, but before they head on to our board, you may have some of what we call priority points added to your application. You may have some additional percentage points added to your score, depending on if you meet some of these criteria. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if you are from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or LGBTQ communities, or a person with a disability, or if you live in a county that has not been receiving as many grants from us recently. So you could earn up to 3 additional percentage points to be added onto your score at this stage. If your grant is awarded, you'll complete a grant contract. You'll have 30 days to do that, and you can find that online on your dashboard where we just were looking. And then once we have received that contract, you'll receive payment of your full award amount. And then as far as acknowledging the grant, depending on the type of project you're doing, you likely will not need to do anything with this, but if for some reason you were showing your work or performing in a situation where you'd be putting out information about it yourself, you would need to use a credit line that'll be in your grant contract, possibly this Minnesota Legacy logo, and all of that will be sent to you. But like I said, based on the kind of project you're doing, you probably will not need to use that at all. We also realize that all kinds of things can happen. So if you end up running into some issues with your project as it's going on and need to make some changes, please contact us and we may be able to help work things out. Some things we may be able to do are extending your project date or approving some changes to your budget if some item or opportunity is no longer available and you need to switch and go a different route. So not to worry if things are not going according to plan, just contact us and we can help you figure something out. Your final report will be due 60 days after the project end date that you chose. And it's a good idea as you're just getting started on your project to take a look at that report just to know what kinds of information you'll need to be gathering during the project. So that is it for our art study opportunity for youth grants today. You'll see we have some contact information here, multiple ways to contact us. If you haven't been to our office for a while, we have moved. Our new office is at 509 West Main Street in Marshall. And if anyone has anything they'd like to talk through in more detail, you can stay on. But otherwise, I will say thank you to all of you, and we hope to hear from you. Have a good evening.